End of an era. The Confederate battle flag is lowered from the South Carolina State House. Hollywood legend Walter Matthau dies at the age of 79. Police in Cicero, Illinois blame gang members for the killing of two 13-year-old honor students. And a soldier's story of old-fashioned patriotism.
This is the CBS Evening News with Thalia Assuris.
Good evening, everyone. A chapter was closed today in the history of South Carolina. In an emotional ceremony, two Citadel cadets, one black, one white, removed the Confederate flag from the dome of the state legislature in Columbia. Lee Cowan was there.
In the New South, the fight over the old finally came to a bitter and noisy end today.
Pride! 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 Pride!
With shouts of pride yelled from one side of a rope line, shame on the other. South Carolina became the last state in the Union to remove the Confederate flag from its seat of government, but not from government property. It was lowered from the State House dome, only to be raised again in its front yard. An honorable compromise, the state's governor called it, to a feud that's still alive today.
What's important to recognize is this is a significant step for South Carolina.
An all-white legislature voted back in 1962 to raise the rebel flag, reigniting passions never buried after the Civil War. Race for some, reverence for others.
I've got 6 ancestors that died in the war.
And that's what today's about.
Today's about. It's about honoring them and the ones that fought beside them.
You know, if it's about heritage, then what about our heritage? We make up 30% of this state. And I think we have some rights, too.
The NAACP marched silently in protest today and promised their economic boycott that has already cost the state more than $20 million in lost tourism business will continue until the flag is completely off state grounds.
It's like healing a sick person. If you go to the doctor and don't get well from the first dose of medicine, you have to keep going back, and we're going to have to keep going back.
But the majority of South Carolinians, weary of all the shouting, now simply want to call a truce and move on.
I think we have a lot more important things here in South Carolina to be concerned with, and I'm really glad that it's over.
But the debate over the flag may now move to Georgia and Mississippi. Both those already incorporate the design of the Confederate flag in their state flags, and moves are already underway to get those changed as well. Thalia.
Lee Cowan in Columbia, thank you. This weekend could also mark the end of an era in Mexico. The party that has ruled for 7 decades is facing the possibility of defeat in tomorrow's elections. Sandra Hughes joins us live from Mexico City with all the details. Sandra.
Thalia, on the eve of Mexico's presidential elections, the entire country is preparing for history to be made. To guard against trouble, liquor sales were halted last night. And under law, the candidates had to stop campaigning 3 days ago.
But their images are still larger than life, looming on every wall and walking through the streets as novelties for sale.
¿Listo, jóvenes?
For Mexico, it's a horse race like no other, a dead heat. Leading the charge, the conservative candidate from the National Action Party, Vicente Fox, the man who sits poised to topple a 71-year political dynasty.
We're about to have a real democracy July the 2nd. And for the first time in this country, in all of our history, one party will turn power and the presidency to a different party.
His Americanized campaign has come to symbolize change in a country with too few jobs and a century of deep-rooted government corruption. In years past, using el dedazo, or the big finger, Mexico's ruling party appointed their candidate. Elections became formalities in which the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or PRI, always won. This year, the PRI's candidate, Francisco Labastida, promises a clean election and says he'll make big changes.
The question is, can a candidate who comes out of the party solve Mexico's 2 greatest problems, more employment and jobs that pay better, and combat crime and corruption? I'm convinced that the person is Francisco Labastida.
This is the first presidential election that an independent national agency will supervise, not the government.
We have been able to take a step further in consolidating democracy, in organizing free and fair elections.
The election is expected to be so close, it could take days to figure out who won. Thalia.
Sandra Hughes in Mexico City, thanks to you. Words like master, perfect, and natural are being used to describe Hollywood legend Walter Matthau, who died today at the age of 79. Matthau, who mesmerized audiences for more than 30 years, was best known as a crotchety comic. Here's Jerry Bowen.
Walter Matthau never looked like a movie star, not even by the time his reputation and hands were in concrete. But over time, he became America's favorite sourpuss, an actor who elevated grouchiness to an art form.
I'm all of it. Sweet, crotchety, old, coot, very handsome, magnificent, brilliant, wonderful, and good in bed.
Born in New York in 1920 to poor Russian immigrants, he was named Walter Matthau. His first taste of show business came selling sodas at a Yiddish theater, and as he worked his way to Broadway, his last name became Matthau. His big break was a role written specifically for him, Oscar Madison, in The Odd Couple.
Felix, I'm telling you, I see the irony of it.
When he took the role to the big screen, his film career took off.
The irony is that unless we come to some other arrangement, I'm going to kill you. That's the irony of it.
And he found a frequent co-star in Jack Lemmon. Together, they formed one of Hollywood's most successful screen teams. A matter of chemistry, Matthau said years later.
I'm citrate of magnesia, and he's constipated.
Nice talk. I'm handing you $250,000 on a silver platter.
It was the movie Fortune Cookie which earned Matthau an Academy Award, an honor which prompted a typical eccentric and crusty response.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. I thought I'd get it. I looked at my competition, and I thought I'd get it.
And he admittedly spent a lifetime betting on one supposed sure thing after another. His gambling losses exceeded $5 million. But every time he assumed the role of grumpy old man, he and the audience were winners. It was a role he reprised later in his career with his old film partner.
So what?
Huh?
What?
Huh?
So?
What?
What?
How to remember Walter Matthau? Perhaps this statement tonight from Jack Lemmon says it best. We have lost one of the best damn actors we'll ever see. In Hollywood, this is Jerry Bowen, CBS News.
Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, anti-Americanism on the rise in France. Also, power to the people. More consumers choose their electricity supplier. And the story of Harry Potter and the broken sales embargo. Cicero, Illinois, which has long battled gang violence, is in mourning again tonight. 2 young boys were shot dead as they sat on a porch. 2 other teenagers have been charged with murder. Jacqueline Adams reports.
The neat row houses in this Chicago suburb give no sense of danger. Yet in Cicero, Illinois, police say honor students Mark Lopez and Ruben Pulido were shot to death as they sat on a front porch, part of a gang rivalry that the 2 13-year-olds had no part in.
My son was not involved in any type of gang activity. He was only a 13-year-old boy, a sweet, precious little boy.
Police have charged 2 young men with murder. 19-year-old Juan Casillas, they say, saw one youngster on the porch wearing rival gang colors and mistook him for an enemy. Then police say he ordered 16-year-old Robert Haney to take out a gun.
He yelled gang slogans and then moved out of the way and ordered Mr. Haney then to open fire on the group, saying, and I quote, light them up.
Gangs are an ongoing menace in Cicero, and community leaders there have been stymied in their efforts to crack down. 2 controversial ordinances were challenged as unconstitutional last year, one barricading streets and evicting gang members from their homes, another impounding the cars of suspected gang members. The constitutional niceties are lost on one grieving father.
Everybody loved them. Never did anything bad. He's gone. He's my best friend.
The shootings will no doubt raise the issue of gang violence again in a town that's tried and failed to curb it. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, New York.
On the CBS Health Watch, a sharp rise in infections from the AIDS virus in San Francisco. From a low of 1.3% in 1996, the HIV infection rate rose to 3.7% last year. Officials link it to riskier sexual behavior among gay men. There's more to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, including American symbols getting the cold shoulder in France. The trial of a French sheep farmer charged with trashing McDonald's ended today, with the prosecutor recommending a suspended sentence. Supporters cheered farmer José Bove, whose opposition to globalization reflects growing anti-American sentiment. Mark Phillips reports.
Get off the train in Paris and the first thing you see is not a joint flogging escargot or frog's legs, but the French taste for American hamburgers, American movies, American clothes now comes with the new post-Cold War fear of what some see as America's real intentions.
To dominate the world economically, culturally, military, and we have to resist to that.
The irresistible power of American commerce and culture has always worried French intellectuals, even if the consuming masses have always gobbled the stuff up. But what's really worrying them now is that American power seems so unchecked at a time when American values seem increasingly different from their own.
I tell only to the European, to the undeveloped countries, to the citizens all over the world, wake up.
Noel Mamer's book, No Thanks, Uncle Sam, has struck a chord here. The U.S.-led air war against Serbia last year, for example, is seen as America imposing its will however and wherever it likes. What is it about the way America behaves these days that sticks in the French throat?
Everything, I would say everything. I mean, anti-Americanism has a tendency to see every catastrophe, every disaster, every problem as being America's fault.
The argument is compounded by an ongoing trade war where Washington has responded to a French ban on U.S. hormone-fed beef by banning French products. What's more, the French look at America's use of the death penalty and school shootings and worry that
we combine this runaway power, this great technology, with and that we don't equate that with a moral leadership.
American symbols have become targets as American power is seen as running roughshod over local interests. A worker died in this bomb blast. And the U.S. must now convince at least one of its allies that the same qualities of strength and moral certainty that won the Cold War can win the peace. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Paris.
Vermont's law permitting civil unions between gay couples is now in effect. Kathleen Peterson and Carolyn Conrad were the first to take advantage, tying the knot shortly after midnight. About 20 to 30 other couples also legalized their unions today. One of publishing's best-kept secrets isn't. Booksellers were sworn to keep the new Harry Potter book under tightest wraps until next Saturday. But an 8-year-old Fairfax, Virginia girl has a copy. Her father says a friend bought 2 at a local bookstore. No questions asked. Coming up on the CBS Evening News, at home with a true American patriot. Every year, Americans consume $250 billion worth of electricity. And for the most part, they've had no choice but to pay up to the one local utility. But now that's starting to change. Consumer choice in the electricity business is the focus of tonight's Weekend Perspective. It used to be so simple. Flick a switch, instant electricity, and no worries about where it came from. But now that's all changing. Today, Maryland becomes the latest state to let consumers choose their electric company.
It's your call.
The idea is that when energy producers must compete, users pay less.
It's going to cause a few problems and all among that, but yeah, I think it'll be fine.
There'll be problems in the beginning, just like the way it was when Ma Bell broke up, but eventually it'll iron itself out, and I think it'll be better for the people.
This comes at a time when the demand for electricity is quickly outpacing supply. With the onset of summer and the use of energy-guzzling air conditioners, power companies are warning that brownouts are inevitable. One reason is the shortage of new power plants. Deregulation, it is hoped, will improve that by putting profit into building new ones.
They're going to have to be able to deliver that power more efficiently so that they can get it to consumers at a lower cost.
But home users may prove to be a difficult and unwelcome market.
They're more expensive to serve, they're more expensive to acquire, and their usage differs from that of an industrial customer because it goes up and down.
To protect consumers during the transition, they're being guaranteed a 7% price reduction, which will be frozen for at least 4 years. That gives new power companies time to peddle their wares, and consumers time to choose their new supplier. Ironically, the price is now so low, not one of the new companies licensed by the state can offer a cheaper price. But that's expected to change.
I think I would be attentive. I'd be sort of, if I were you, I would be watching what's going on, what kind of offers are coming.
And for consumers worried about who to call if the power goes out, there will be no changes. The same company that repairs the lines today will repair them in the future.
When you flip your light switch, the lights still come on.
But here's the irony. As deregulation drives down rates, consumers may increase their use. That might be good for the wallet, but bad for an industry struggling to keep the power flowing. We'll be back. As we celebrate America's birthday, some thoughts about patriotism. Steve Hartman traveled to Oregon, where he met a man of few words for whom Old Glory speaks volumes. Yet another example that proves everybody has a story.
Come on, man. Hup, hup. Keep moving. That's it. Slow and steady does it.
The Oregon Trail Interpretive Center shows what life was like for the first settlers in Baker Valley.
Keep the pace up, Johnson.
And how I wish those pioneers were still here today.
Here's the exciting part.
Because I could have used a good team of oxen to pull a story.
Eric Colton.
Out of this covered wagon.
You're not the most outgoing guy.
No.
You don't say a whole lot.
I'm awful shy.
Like 1 or 2 word answers kind of thing.
Yep.
Chatty Cowboy here.
Am I supposed to look right into that thing?
No.
Oh.
Lives on a 4,000-acre ranch with his equally camera-shy wife, Darcy, their daughter, Shelby, and their son, Talon, who they swear was not adopted. Eric and Darcy met in school, and true to form,
you realize how strange this is going to sound to most people?
I know.
He proposed.
I guess it would.
On the phone.
What about a ring? What'd you do with the ring? You what?
I sent it in the mail.
Uninsured.
But she got it.
Yeah, she got it, all right.
The letter folded in the box said, "Howdy." He starts every letter, "Howdy. How's my fiance?"
I should probably explain. Eric isn't that shy. He was just never around here. After high school, he joined the Marines, lived in California, Japan for a while, came home briefly to get married. Yes, he did see her for that. But then left again on a 7-month tour of duty that gave him the story of his lifetime.
Well, I think probably every day. Sometime a day I think about it.
Eric fought in the Gulf War and was one of the first ones in to liberate Kuwait.
In some of the villages they had women and men just murdered right there in their lawns and still laying there.
For a guy who's not a big talker, this is perhaps his toughest subject. And yet to really know Eric, all you have to do is stop for a minute and look at the flag. Look at how he placed it so prominently in the center of his yard.
I'll sit out here on the deck and watch it. It's a good sight.
And maybe that's why, if you ever go to the George Bush Library in College Station, Texas, if you go into their Gulf War exhibit, you'll find there, encapsulated in mylar, preserved forever, a letter from a soldier that begins, "Mr. President, howdy. We will not let the American people down," Eric wrote. "As a United States Marine, Mr. President, I promise you and the rest of the country, we will win this one."
I've never been a big believer in you had to talk to get across to somebody. It's what you do for them, or certain things you do. It's just as good as words.
And that's how even a quiet man can speak for a nation. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Baker County, Oregon.
Speak indeed. And that is the CBS Evening News. Tomorrow on Sunday morning, the real storm behind the movie The Perfect Storm. Then on Face the Nation, the Human Genome Project, and baseball's home run explosion. I'm Thalia Ashuris, CBS News in New York. Have a good night and a great holiday weekend.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Experience you can trust. CBS News.